Hi, I'm Tasha with Pathways to Peace Counseling, and this is video 4 of our series on should I medicate my child with ADHD. So we've talked about just what is ADHD all about, and what are some of the different things that go into it. We've talked about parenting and diet. In this video, we're going to talk about screen time. So screen time is a really big deal for ADHD kids. There's something about the way that their brains are wired that it is so hard for them to let go of playing video games. Like they become absolutely obsessed. I don't know how many of them will come into my office and try to spend the entire time that we have talking about Fortnite or whatever video game it is that they're obsessed on at that moment. But here's the deal. They are getting so used to these lightning fast speeds of information flying at their little brains that they cannot slow down enough to do their worksheets at school, to tune into a book. And, there's such a difference between just this lightning fast information from watching, even scrolling videos on YouTube. They're just getting inundated with so much, and then they have to be still and focus on schoolwork, and it is so hard for them. Another thing about it is that, did you know that there really is a video game addiction? And when kids are tuning in and playing video games, their brains light up just like with dopamine, just like a drug addict who is getting high on drugs. Like they get such a dopamine release from playing video games that it is unbelievable how much they can get addicted to it. So they're constantly yearning for their next dopamine fix. And so they're like thinking about it all day, like, oh, I can't wait to get home so I can play my game. So that's a problem. We've got to learn how to pull them back and really limit the amount of time that they are getting the screen time, because they kind of become junkies with it. And I mean, that sounds kind of bad, but it's really what happens. They are so fixated on getting their next dopamine hit that it consumes their minds. So that's kids that are really addicted to video games. Now, here's another thing that I find very concerning for children, especially with ADHD, and that is exposure to pornography. It is all over the place, and parents need to be aware of the type of things that their children might come across. And so there are links that are being sent through social media. I've had children receive links on Roblox. I have heard of kids having pornography links sent to them through Instagram. It is so easy to stumble across it. And even a very innocent game might have ad pop-ups they're making these horrible games of, cartoon characters seducing one another and engaging in sexual acts. And this is showing up in ads of innocent games. And so parents, beware. If your child has their own tablet or phone, be very cautious about just handing it over and letting them go to the room and spend time on it unsupervised, because you never know what they're going to come across. I would also be very adamant about putting screen time restrictions, limiting the screen time as much as possible, but also limiting which apps they can download. And, you want to make sure that you're putting parental controls as far as, not allowing them to see any mature content. So just be super cautious with that, because here's what happens. Once a child's sexual desires are awakened, they never go away. So if your 5-year-old comes across pornography and their little mind is opened up to the sexual world, they are changed forever. And there's a lot you can do to try to mitigate the damages, but that curiosity is there, and it is likely going to be problematic for you and your child. So I would be very cautious about screen time for your child. And honestly, if your child is below 5 years old, there's really no reason for them to have a device. And I would limit TV time to very minimum. Elementary age kids, I know that they're with the school system that they are on computers and tablets a lot more, but I would keep it very minimal. And I would focus on only educational things, and make sure that, like I would play these games before you let your kids loose on them, to make sure that you know what it is that your child is doing. Because once the damage is done, it is so hard to go back and fix it. Another thing I would be cautious about is once they start getting into middle school and they're wanting their own phone and they're wanting social media, children with ADHD struggle with impulsive behavior. And a lot of times it's these children that are sexting pictures to other people. There's just a lot that can go wrong. So be super cautious before you give your child a phone. And you might make sure that that camera stays off whenever you give your child a phone because once those pictures are sent, you can't unsend them, and the damage that can be done is catastrophic. So be super, super careful when it comes to screen time. Another thing that comes up with screen time is whenever a child is playing, say, Fortnite, they're playing a war game and their body is reacting as though they're actually in war. The fight or flight response is going berserk. It's creating high levels of stress hormones in their body. And so there's this chemical reaction that happens and then they're going to feel stressed. They're going to feel like they're out of control because they're engaging in a war game and and they get so upset whenever they die in the game. It impacts them. And a lot of times as parents, we think of it as being it's just a video game. It's not that big of a deal. But there really can be some long-term effects that go along with playing these war games. Another thing is a lot of these kids are interacting with each other online while they play. And believe me, if you've ever heard a kid play Fortnite and you hear on the speakers what the other children are saying, it is not good. So if your child's playing Fortnite or these other interactive games where they're playing with other children, you might keep yourself in the loop and hear what's really going on because it is sometimes really unbelievable. And I have been shocked at how many kids that I have found that have made friends playing games online with somebody else on the other side of the world or across the country, and they're developing relationships. And they're kind of pseudo relationships. They're not always very truthful. There's just a lot of questionable things that can happen. So just be aware that those are things that can happen whenever children are playing games online. One thing that we learned from the pandemic is that social isolation is very damaging to children and can be deadly. Suicide rates soared during the pandemic because people just could not take the social isolation and just this intense change from having real social interactions to having this counterfeit online relationship with people. And if you think about it, whenever you're scrolling through Facebook and you see posts from your friends, you kind of get a sentimental feeling like, oh my goodness, look at what's going on with my friends' children. And oh, my niece is in this play way out in Nebraska or wherever. But you feel this emotional pull to what is happening. But the thing is, you didn't have a phone conversation, you didn't have a face to face gathering. They didn't get to experience your reaction to it. So it's really this muted, watered down social approach to life to where it's fake. It's fake. You don't get this authentic interaction that we need from people. And of course, everybody puts the highlights on social media, but nobody hears, like, my example is always, you see a lady getting flowers on Facebook and she makes such a big deal of, oh, look at my husband. He gave me this beautiful bouquet of flowers, but she doesn't talk about the big blow up fight they had the night before and how he bought those flowers to make up for it, right? Like, we don't know the whole story. And what we see on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok is so artificial. So children need face-to-face interaction. They need to get to know people. And there's an energy we have when we get together with people that you miss whenever you're online. And so I would highly recommend outdoor playtime. Invite friends over to your house. Let your kids play, get outside and roughhouse if they need to. Roughhousing is something that we'll talk about next in our exercise segment about ADHD. But skip the screen time and go for genuine social interactions because they are so much more powerful and meaningful for your children. And they're a lot less likely to get exposed to really bad, nasty things if they're having supervised very healthy relationships with their children, with other children. I hope you enjoyed this segment of our talk about should I medicate my child with ADHD. And I will note, I have had kids who their parents just took away screen time. That was enough that they did not need medication It's amazing how much can happen. And my experience has been that usually they'll have a falling out of maybe 3 days of withdrawals from the video games before they really start to get better. But once they get off those video games, a lot of the kids, they're they're doing a lot better. They're able to focus on their work at school, and a lot of these symptoms really minimize. So this might be a really powerful way of helping your children overcome these symptoms without having to resort to medication.